My presentations have been in honor of the Advent, which Rick so aptly spoke about, the first 2 Sundays of Advent. And this morning, in keeping with the Advent season, because tomorrow is when we celebrate Christmas Day, we're looking forward to that celebration of the birth of Christ. We cherish the picture of the nativity scene. We are joyful that he would love us so much that he would come to us from his throne in heaven. But let us not forget the purpose, to provide a way for us to know him and be reconciled to God through him. Let us remember that in his great love for us, the cross points us to God as we look forward to the advent of his coming again for those who believe. This morning, I'm going to be telling you the tale of 3 trees. It's a traditional folk tale that's retold by Angela Elwell Hunt. Once upon a mountaintop, 3 little trees stood and wondered and dreamed about what they would become when they grew up. The first little tree looked up at the stars twinkling in the night sky above him. I want to be a treasure, he said. I want to be covered with gold and filled with precious stones. I will be the most beautiful treasure chest in the world. The second little tree looked out at the small stream trickling on its way down the mountain toward the ocean. I want to be strong, he said. I want to travel through mighty waters and carry powerful kings. I want to be the strongest sailing ship in the world. The third little tree looked down into the valley below, where men and busy women worked in a busy village. I don't want to leave this mountaintop at all, she said. I want to grow so tall that when people stop and look at me, they will raise their eyes toward heaven and it will point to God. I will be the tallest tree in the world. Years passed. The rains came, the sun shone, and the trees grew. And then one day, 3 woodcutters came to the mountaintop. The first woodcutter looked at the first tree and said, "What a beautiful tree! This is perfect for me." And with a swoop of his axe, the tree fell. Now I shall be made into a beautiful treasure chest, thought the tree. I shall hold wonderful treasure. The second woodcutter looked at the second tree and said, "This tree is strong. It is perfect for me." And with a swoop of his axe, the second tree fell. Now I shall sail mighty waters, thought the second tree. I shall be strong enough fit for the kings. The third tree felt her heart sink when the last woodcutter looked her way. But she stood straight and tall and pointed bravely toward heaven. But the woodcutter never even looked up. "Any kind of tree will do for me," he muttered. With a swoop of his shining axe, the third tree fell. The first tree rejoiced when the woodcutter brought him to the carpenter's shop. But the busy carpenter was not making any treasure chests that day. Instead, his work-worn hands fashioned the beautiful tree into a feed box for animals. The once beautiful tree was not covered with gold or filled with precious stones. He was covered with sawdust and filled with hay for hungry farm animals. The second tree smiled when the woodcutter took him to the shipyard. But there were no mighty sailing ships being made that day. Instead, the once strong tree was hammered and nailed and sawed into a simple fishing boat, too small and too weak to sail an ocean or even a river. So they took him to a lake where every day he brought in dead, smelly fish. The third tree was confused when the woodcutter cut her into strong beams and left her in a lumber pile. What happened? The once tall tree wondered. All I ever wanted to do was stay on the mountaintop and point to God. Many, many days passed. The three trees nearly had forgotten their dreams. But one night, a golden starlight poured out over the first tree as a young woman placed her newborn infant into the feed box. I wish I could have made a cradle for him, said her husband. The mother squeezed his hand and smiled as the starlight shone on the smooth and sturdy wood. This manger is beautiful, she said. And suddenly, the first tree knew that he was holding the greatest treasure in the world. One evening, a tired traveler and his friends crowded into a small old fishing boat. The traveler fell asleep, and the second tree quietly sailed out onto the lake. Soon a thundering and thrashing storm arose, and the little tree shuddered. He knew he did not have the strength to carry so many passengers safely through the wind and the rain. The tired man was awakened, and he stood up, and he stretched out his hand, and he said, "Peace, be still." And the storm stopped as quickly as it had begun. And suddenly, the second tree knew he was carrying the King of heaven and earth. One Friday morning, the third tree was startled when her beams were yanked from the woodpile. She flinched as she was carried through an angered, jeering crowd. She shuddered when soldiers nailed a man's hands to her. She felt ugly and harsh and cruel. But on Sunday morning, when the sun rose and the earth trembled with joy beneath her, the third tree knew that God's love had changed everything. God's love had made the first tree beautiful. God's love had made the second tree strong. And every time people thought of the third tree, they would think of God. And that would be better than being the tallest tree in the world. John 3:16 and 17. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. For God brought his Son into the world, not to condemn the world, but that the world might be saved through him. Thank you.